Okay, so we are officially live and students are going to start filtering in now. So hi everyone, it looks like the first students are starting to join here. This is Aaron from the Mind Sumo team, and we'll be starting just about 5 minutes after 6 o'clock to allow for some students that are late joining the Hangout to get on board. So hello to all the new students who have just joined. We're going to be getting started in just a few minutes here, and I'm watching more students jump in on the feed. We're waiting just a few more minutes to get started. So hello, welcome to the students that have just joined. Once again, this is Aaron from Mind Sumo. In just a few minutes, I'll be passing control off to Siobhan and the Capital One team, And just so all the students know, if you open up and actually mouse over the top left area of the Google Hangout screen here, there's a Q&A function. So as the Hangout progresses, if you have questions, feel free at any time to enter questions into the Q&A function tab over there. And at the end of the presentation at the beginning of this session, the team will be happy to answer all of your questions.
Hey folks, this is Siobhan Gordon. We've got about 2 more minutes and then we're excited to get started after that.
Hi everyone, and welcome to all the students who just joined us. Once again, this is Aaron from MindSumo. And in just about a minute here, I'm going to be passing things off to Siobhan. I'll be turning my video feed off, and we will begin the presentation. And this is just one last reminder that if you'd like to ask any questions, on the left-hand side of the Hangout screen, if you float your mouse over there, you can pull up a Q&A tab where you can enter any questions that you'll have for the team after the initial presentation. And with that, Siobhan, I'm going to pass it off to you. You guys can get started whenever you're ready.
All right, let's get started. So welcome to everybody who's joined us today. We're really excited to have a great conversation related to gender diversity and technology. My name is Siobhan Gordon. I work for Capital One. We're broadcasting live from our office in Richmond, Virginia today, where it's snowing outside, I think. So hopefully you guys are all staying warm and not having to deal with bad weather. I've been with Capital One for 14 years. I've spent most of that time in the technology department and then most recently moved over to help out in diversity recruiting, where my job is to work to bring more great women into technology, which is really cool. I have a degree in systems engineering from the University of Virginia, and hoping that we have some students from UVA on the phone today. I'm here with a great panel of women, all of whom I know and work with quite a bit. And we're going to share a little bit about our technology organization, some of the cool opportunities that we have there. But mostly we want to talk a little bit about the topic of gender diversity in the tech industry and share some of our experiences in that space, and have a great interactive discussion with you. So as Aaron mentioned, there's an opportunity for you to ask questions for us. We're going to have time later on in the conversation where myself and members of the panel will respond to those questions. So before we get started, a quick intro to Capital One and kind of who we are. We are a Fortune 200 company, but we have a startup attitude. Technology and innovation have always been kind of key to our culture here. We're one of those companies where, you know, a lot of companies treat technology as a necessary evil, where at Capital One we embrace it and realize that it's kind of the key for us in differentiating ourselves in the market. We are positioned to kind of succeed well in the new world of banking, where the focus is clearly on technology and being able to bank using different technology options. We are the nation's leading digital bank. We are deep-rooted in analytics. Analytics and data are kind of crucial and central to our philosophy. We focus a lot, so for, you know, all of my women out there in technology, we focus a lot on agile delivery, which is the ability to deliver software in an iterative manner. Um, our priorities kind of reflect our commitment to just becoming a great software company. We are a bank, but we relate more to a technology company than a bank. So we typically compare ourselves to the Googles and the Microsofts and the Facebooks, less to the B of A's and the Wells Fargo. And I think you'll find when you hear from some of the ladies here that their experience is far from what you would expect from a traditional bank. So from a technology perspective, we leverage a lot of the leading technologies, including, diverse programming languages. We leverage cloud computing. We do a lot with APIs and open source, just to name a few. Kaylin and Katie and Melanie are going to talk about some of the cool technologies that they're working on as well. And we'll continue to kind of look for opportunities to be on the leading edge of technology because, again, we see it as a way to kind of be a leader in the industry. So with that information, I'm going to allow my great, fabulous panelist members to introduce themselves. I think they're pretty awesome. I'm going to get them to say how long they worked at Capital One, where they work now, also what college or university they graduated from in their degree, as well as tell us about something cool that they are currently working on. So we'll start with Katie.
All right, get myself off mute. All right, so I graduated from Carnegie Mellon in 2013. I had a degree in materials engineering and biomedical engineering. I started working soon after graduation, so almost 2 years now, a year and a half. And I now work on our Android mobile app. Is that good?
Thanks, Katie. I was talking to I have my crew here. Kaylin, you want to go next?
Yeah, I graduated the same year as Katie, so a year and a half ago. I'm also a software engineer here. I started coding in high school by accident. Just kind of had a friend who said there was this Visual Basic class. She thought it was supposed to be like Microsoft Office, and that it was a really easy A. Turns out it's programming, and we both went into the class and we're like, what is this? But that got us started interested in programming, and then I studied computer science in college, along with psychology and engineering leadership. So I sort of like designing the whole experience and thinking about how users will actually use our programs, which is fun. Outside of work, I'm really into hackathons. So if there's anybody here from the Ladies Storm Hackathon group, that's something I'm really active in, and probably get to around 15 to 20 hackathons per year, as well as an organization called Women Who Code. So those are sort of things I like for fun. And then here at Capital One, I've done all sorts of Java APIs, and I'm starting to do Go development. So if you haven't checked out Go, I would definitely recommend it because it's an awesome language.
Cool. Thanks, Kaylin. And then last but not least, Melanie.
Off of mute. So my name's Melanie Frank. I graduated well after Kaylin and Katie. So I am currently a senior director in technology, and I run our online servicing departments for our card line of business. I've been here 15 years in July after spending 4 years at Honeywell at Goddard Space Center, and after graduating from the University of Virginia with a degree in aerospace engineering. So my teams right now are building our online servicing websites, all doing in-house Java development, pushing into the Angular space, and leveraging kind of back-end APIs into to expose a lot of our big data technology to our customers directly online. That's it.
Awesome. So as you guys can see, our ladies are up to some pretty cool things here at Capital One. And so we're going to move right into our conversation, and we're going to start with Katie. I mean, can you share with us some of the statistics? I mean, tell us just how big is the gender gap that we're seeing in the technology space? You know, what's going on with schools and colleges today that's kind of leading to this gap that we're seeing?
Sure. So, I mean, clearly most of y'all have probably experienced the gender gap anyway at the college level, but it's interesting because in high school, more than half, 56% of all AP test takers are women, and 46% of AP Calc test takers are women. but then only 19% are 19% of the computer science AP test takers are women. So it's already starting lower in high school, which is kind of interesting. And then, it just continues on into college. So more than 50% of undergraduate degrees are now given to women, but only 18% are of computer science graduates are women. So it's starting younger, and then that just translates into now the working force. And so now it's only 25% of technology jobs are held by women, and only 11% of Fortune 500 tech company executives are women. And it's good to, I think, have that balance, or it could, I don't know, but this dropout rate it's a number of factors. Can be parenthood, but it's also surprisingly not just about work-life family balance. It's also about workplace environment and culture that can be causing women to leave the tech industry and move to a different career. And so they still have a career, they're just not staying in tech.
Right, right. I think it's also interesting. I heard another leader here at Capital One speaking on the same topic, and she mentioned that this wasn't as big of an issue back in the late 80s, early 90s. So the issue has definitely grown significantly over the past 20 years, which I thought was very interesting. I'm dating myself, but obviously I was in college in the 90s, and I don't think the gap was quite as large. So I was a little shocked to see how different things look today. So that being said, Melanie, I'd love to hear from you on why should we even care? So why does this, gender gap even matter in technology, and why should we even care about these stats?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I have to say, I've always thought of what matters in diversity as being just diversity in thought, and paid less attention to gender. As someone, a female going through engineering school, I found myself always, and even still today, just so used to being one of the only females in the room that it never really bothered me. And I can look at a group of my female friends and say, I'm not so sure that, of the 10 of us that hang out, that the other 9 would make good engineers. And so I had this kind of getting involved in some of our women in technology. I wasn't necessarily this bleeding feminist, right? I kind of looked at it and said, well, I'm not sure it's cut out for everybody. And then you look at some of the statistics, and I've got 3 young kids myself, so I have 2 girls and a boy. And I started to become more conscious of these subconscious biases and reading up more on it, and just then reading some pure statistics about how a gender-balanced organization functions. And there are 2 pretty remarkable studies and statistics, one of which is that if you look at the return on investment in companies where there are women in management, it's actually 34% higher where you have women in management versus just men. And then if you look at, there's another study that was done by MIT with Carnegie Mellon, and it was a study on group intelligence, and they looked at groups, single gender groups with mixed gender groups, and the collective intelligence of the mixed gender groups was significantly higher. So there's just something, again, about that diversity, not just in thought, but actually in that gender diversity, and kind of getting a diverse group together that actually raises the collective intelligence of a group, and then obviously the productivity of a company. So it got me thinking differently too of, actually this is a real and valuable thing, and what causes folks to drop off here, and how do we attack that to make sure that we've got the right kind of openings and the right thought process, and we're not inadvertently discouraging females from continuing in a technology channel.
Right. Those are great points. And like you, Melanie, I've got 2 daughters at home, and so this has definitely made me think twice about the type of extracurricular activities I enroll them in. My oldest daughter is taking 3D programming class, which I think is awesome. but it's made me be a bit more deliberate about making sure that they know that, hey, you know, STEM and math and science and technology is not a bad thing. So thanks, Katie and Melanie. Kaylin, you know, I know that you are very much involved in some of the work that Capital One is doing to focus on women in technology. I've actually had the pleasure of working with you on a couple of events. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about, or talk to the group about what Capital One is doing to focus on this issue?
Yeah, I'm going to try. I could talk about this probably for a long time.
I know you can.
If I go too long, somebody should write a question saying to stop, and I will.
I'll give you the thing.
Yeah. So some history. We have had a women's network at Capital One for a while now, but in about like midsummer last year, we started talking about how, hey, maybe it would be awesome to have a group that focuses more on women in technology, and how can we kind of build that up. And it was sort of this like, awesome, everybody agreed immediately, no one said no to anything, and we kind of threw ourselves into Grace Hopper as our first big event that we went to, which is like, if you're going to go to any event for women in technology, Grace Hopper is absolutely the conference to go to. So that was really eye-opening, I think, for us, and it got a bunch of us excited about what we can do next year and how do we get more involved in this whole space. So that's really launched into, like, we're going to be a platinum sponsor at the conference. And for those of you that don't know what Grace Hopper is, well, Grace Hopper is this awesome engineer that basically invented compiled languages and all sorts of awesome things like that. But there's a yearly conference where people go and learn all sorts about technology as well as how to do better in their career. But if you haven't heard of it, you should check it out, and you should try to find a way to get there in October. So we do that. That's a big one for us. We've also been one of the founding sponsors for Women Who Code, which, of course, I mentioned earlier. I'm involved with that, so I'm kind of biased, but a ton of fun. They do a bunch of things involving like teaching women how to code, as well as trying to really focus on the retention issue within women in technology, and sort of better understanding why do women leave and how can we provide more networks so that you don't feel like you should. Beyond that, though, we've been doing a bunch of other conferences. There's like the Tech Superwoman Conference was out in San Francisco the other week, which was a ton of fun. And there's like Textures, so there's teaching younger girls how to code as well, so sort of getting the whole spectrum involving like from when you're younger in middle school and high school, why do you not feel interested in math, to, you know, in your careers, how do we better build you up as a leader in technology. So we'll do a lot of trainings there. But it's a ton of fun. And actually, now that I think about it, there's one, Black Girls Code is an organization that we're just getting involved with, as well as hopefully Girls Who Code, but they do sort of these hackathons and trainings for girls in middle school and high school. So as people in college, if you have one of their networks around you, you should totally mentor. They're a ton of fun. I love going out to them and sort of like making little apps or showing them how to make a website as well. So those are sort of just a kind of sampling of the external events that we do. And that sort of is like the fun, showy things where you get to travel around the country. Hopefully you can find an employer that will send you to some of these events, because they all should be. But we do more internally as well. So we'll do things like having trainings on unconscious bias, or trainings for interns, because a lot of times, Melanie mentioned this, but you might not think about this in college. I know I didn't. Like, I just, you know, you're so focused trying to pass all your classes, you don't necessarily have time to think like, hey, how do people interact with each other, and how does that sort of affect their teamwork? So we'll do trainings on those sorts of things, as well as we're starting a day-long conference for all women in technology, where hopefully everybody will be flying to Richmond, and we'll probably change the location each year. But just getting everybody together to talk about cool development practices and maybe making some apps ourselves as a whole, which should be really fun. So we sort of do a whole smattering of like events internally and externally, but it's a lot of fun.
Right, and I know it's been really cool too to have the women here at Capital One participate in that event. It's very fulfilling for them because they get to participate with a lot of the external organizations as well as do the internal trainings. I know that's been really great for them too. And you can see the excitement in Kaylin's face as she talks about it. So thanks, Kaylin. All right, so we're actually going to pause and see if there are any questions from folks who have joined us today. So if you have questions, now is a good time to ask. I see one here from Garrett, and he is asking, congratulations to Garrett. He's actually lucky enough to have an interview with us. He's interviewing for our Business Analyst Power Day. He called it a super day. It is going to be a super day, Garrett. It's going to be awesome. And it says, any hints or tips or ideas that I should know or review before I walk in the door on March 4th? So that's a great question. Hopefully you have your recruiter's name and information handy. I would reach out to them because they do have some information that they can provide you to help prepare you for what you can expect that day. You probably, if you had a first round at your college or university, you probably have already had one interview that was a case for business analysts. When you come on site, you're going to have another case. I think you may have one or two cases, and then you're also going to have you're going to have a behavioral interview, and that's more of an opportunity for us to hear about your experiences working on teams and dealing with conflicts and problems. There is prep work that you can do to get yourself ready for the case. It'll be similar to the one that you had at school. And your recruiter should be able to provide that for you. A lot of times, too, I know at UVA we assign a buddy, so there could be somebody that the recruiter can point you to who can also provide you with some additional support to help you get ready for that day. Hopefully that answers your question. If it didn't, feel free to shoot me another one. And good luck. Hopefully we look forward to seeing you on March 4th, and hopefully it's not snowing. Any other questions? All right, well, I have a couple here that I'll ask. If you have questions, don't be shy. And they don't necessarily have to be really, if you have a general question about Capital One, feel free to ask that as well. But I'll ask a question. So either Katie or Kaylin, so what was the biggest surprise for you related to kind of gender diversity and dynamics when you started your career at Capital One?
Oh wait, I got distracted by the question that popped up. What was the end of the question?
So your biggest surprise, like when you came to work for Capital One and you looked around, what was the biggest surprise you noticed just related to gender diversity and like the amount of men, women in technology?
I think one of the bigger surprises for me was when we joined, the Women in Tech conversation was just starting to become a bigger one, but it was pretty new to everybody. Over the past year, it's kind of, people are talking about it more, you see it in newspapers more. And one thing that surprised me was people saw that I was getting involved, and guys would sort of comment like, hey, I see you're doing these events, etc. And I was surprised that a lot of times they would come up and just kind of be asking questions around like, what does this mean? And when women are saying that they feel not included, like, what is happening, and how does that, how can I kind of observe that and maybe stop that? And not just from older men that you would expect, have daughters and are thinking of those people. It was even from recent college grads that I was just talking to, and they really were trying to think about how can they help and how can they sort of talk through this as well, which I haven't seen a lot of. A lot of times I think guys can be afraid to get engaged with the conversation, but I've been very surprised by how willing people are to talk about it. And generally, you'll find that you have a lot of similarities. I'll talk about imposter syndrome, and I've had a lot of guys be like, I feel that all the time too, and I don't know how to handle that when I feel that way as well, which is, those are some cool conversations to have.
Right. I think it's important too that people, actually are taking the time to ask the questions, right, rather than kind of remaining quiet and pretending that there's not, an elephant in the room, right? So I think that's pretty awesome. All right, we have a question. It's a good question, actually. It's from Sharon. It says, as of 2011, 48% of medical student graduates are women. That's a whole lot better than 19% of CS degrees. I agree. What do you guys think is the reason for the difference, considering both are STEM-based? That's a good question. Melanie, is that one you want to tackle?
I'll try, although it's we're preaching to the line of the choir on here. So I'm not sure I completely get it. I've always thought it was kind of, can't think of a better clean word for being kind of badass, being an engineer. But
I think that's a good way to put it.
It is. So the only thing I can go back to is kind of, as we've been reading up, I think there's a lot of different organizations, and Kaylin talked about a couple of them that are trying to tackle this problem of this fallout, right, of this equivalent level of interest and then what's happening. And I was reading an article and a discussion about should we change the curriculum to be more conducive to kind of both genders. And I personally took offense that you would, the implication was that you would have to kind of dumb down the curriculum to, and what was interesting though that came out of it was, and I can't remember what school it was, they actually didn't change the curriculum at all. There was a class in particular, kind of one of the introduction to programming classes, and they literally, all they did was change the name of the class in the course offering, and the enrollment rate went from completely out of whack to completely even. And that, there's something intriguing in kind of in that alone that says there's something that we're doing that is discouraging women in particular from just even pursuing that as a possibility. So I think there's a whole lot of things that we're looking at kind of when girls are very young, kind of in that elementary, middle school, high school journey, and then kind of what happens as they get into college. And everyone's trying to kind of crack that nut to make it at least equal opportunity. And again, it still might not be for everybody, but at least there aren't people opting out for really no good reason. I don't know if anybody else has anything they'd add.
Yeah, I would also just add, medical students and, everybody's parent wants them to either be a doctor or a lawyer. And so you tend to get encouragement from your adults if you mention you want to be a doctor. My parents didn't really understand what an engineer was. Hey, Mom, I want to be a systems engineer. They're like, so what does that mean? Even computer science, they kind of got it, but they didn't really have a lot of exposure to it. And so unless you have that champion, in your family, in your circle, who kind of gets it and knows what you can do with that degree, you probably aren't getting the same amount of encouragement as you would for a more, a doctor is pretty easy to understand. I think,
yeah,
Kaylin, you were going to add something too.
I will say, growing up and kind of in going to engineering school at a pretty open-minded university, the looks that I used to get, and kind of you'd go out with friends, right, and someone would be like, so, the typical, what's your major question? And I'd always start with engineering, and I'd get a look like, you don't look like an engineer.
Right.
And then they wouldn't know what to ask next, right? And they'd be like, well, what kind? And I'd be like, oh, great. And I'd be like, aerospace. And they'd be like, all right, nice to meet you, bye. So people just don't know what to do with us sometimes. It's not exactly one of those encouraging or popular situations to be in.
There is specific to the medical industry and tech and how those sort of things relates. I'm not sure if we can post links, but one of my favorite research studies was by the New Image and Computing study. And what they found were girls specifically like to be passionate about their jobs, do interesting work, which I think most people care about that, and then have the power to do good and make a difference, which was very specific to women. And I think in the medical industry, there's this clear, you're doing good, you're helping people, you're saving lives, and girls just really are drawn to that. And I think the association between being a programmer and doing good for people hasn't been quite as strongly talked about, but it's a huge deal. If you can make applications that can make people's lives better, whether it is rescuing them in an emergency situation or something where they don't have to worry about their finances as much anymore, you can kind of have that same impact on people. Right. So I think the more we can talk about how programming can actually help people's lives, the more you'll see kind of that change where people do come into the industry.
That's awesome. Thanks, Kaylin. Thanks, Melanie. I think those were great responses. I have another question. This is actually a great question, and it gives us an opportunity to talk about opportunities at Capital One, and it's from Fern, and it says, what year is a good time to start looking at internships? I'm worried that I won't have enough classes under my belt when I apply. That's a good question. I would say it's never too early to start looking for internships. Capital One actually does offer a technology internship program, and it's for rising seniors, so that's in your third year or your junior year, you would be eligible to apply for an internship program. It's a great program because it does expose you to real projects working on some of the technologies that we mentioned earlier, you know, mobile, agile development, cloud computing, and that type of thing. It also gives you great exposure to senior leaders, and it's a good opportunity for you to just test out the environment and make sure that, you know, the corporate environment is a good fit for you and that Capital One is a great fit for you. We also have some great programs for folks who are not rising juniors. So we have the Summit for Software Engineers, which is geared towards first and second year students. Mind you, I went to UVA. We say first, second, third, and fourth. So it's hard for me to say freshman, sophomore, and junior. Melanie knows this. But for freshmen and sophomore, we have the Summit for Software Engineers, and we also have the Summit for Developing Leaders. So maybe you have technical degree, but you're more interested in our business analysis roles. So the Summit for Emerging Leaders, I probably said that wrong. Developing Leaders, that's it. I knew it wasn't emerging. Emerging sounds cool, though. Is also a great program for you. It's where we actually bring you for a week to our Capital One campuses. One of our campuses, typically it's in McLean. We've also just done one down in our campus in Plano, Texas. If you're in the Software Summit, we teach you some cool software skills. We have hackathons. We do, you know, little mini competitions. So you get an opportunity to learn a lot and also network with students from other universities. So it's a great opportunity there. And then if you're in the Leading Summit, same thing. You'll do a case competition. You'll get an opportunity to hear from our senior leaders, and you'll get to experience some great training there. So it's a great program, and it's also a great resume builder. So if you don't have enough classes that you feel like you can put on your resume, those are great things to put on your resume. That's a good question.
The Summit is awesome. Katie made it, a lot of it.
Yeah, and I think Katie and Kaylin help out a lot with the summits for software engineering, and then I've also been to a couple of the summits for leaders as well, and they're both great opportunities. All right, I think we have time for one more question. Okay, time check. I know you guys were expecting to be done at 6:30, so we'll do one more question and then we'll wrap up. This next question is a good one. It's from Kate. And it says, Capital One, oh, this is a great question. Capital One is a big company, and the larger the organization, the more likely bureaucracy is going to creep in. What makes Capital One different? How do you keep a startup tech-focused feel in such a large company? So who wants to take that? I could answer that, but I'm going to be quiet. Katie, Kaylin, or Melanie, anybody want to talk to that one? Or I can talk. I see Katie's unmuted. Katie, you want to chat?
Well, sure. I mean, I can talk about it specifically in my own team, too. So I'm on our mobile team, and one of the great things that my manager encourages our team to do is to find new technology and then bring it in and do side projects with it. So I recently got a Moto 360 watch and doing just, you know, making some programs on it. And even though it may not be directly related to what we're doing here, it's good for us to maintain that cutting edge of technology and really understand what, you know, what's out there and how can we incorporate it and bring it back in. And then, like, we have internal hackathons all the time. We had one last week, and we do just the entire day and get to meet. It's a good way for the executives to learn about new technologies and see other ways we can be incorporating it in our company.
Yeah, and I'll add, I think our Agile transformation itself did a lot to change the two things. It changed kind of our interaction and how we get things done by connecting the technology directly with the product. And so we've got these really smaller looking and feeling units operating together with the intention of delivering faster like a smaller startup. And Agile itself exposes a lot of the waste and bureaucracy that maybe has crept in over time and makes it pretty intolerable at this point. So we had a whole day open space event last week or the week before on, you know, how can we empower engineers to get things done even quicker than we do today. So there's, in general, in our culture right now, there's this intolerance for waste and inefficiency and breaking down barriers, and that's really fun for our engineers to see. So we've got these events that focus on innovation, but then we've got this focus on both kind of keeping smaller teams together, delivering quicker, and eliminating that waste. So I think that's how we're trying to solve it, while still acknowledging that we are, in fact, a big company and a bank.
Yeah. I think those are all great points, and just the fact that we thrive so much on innovation, and we very much have a test and learn culture where we want to test the new technology and learn from it and test again, and leverage the agile methodologies to get it to market faster. We can't really tolerate those long bureaucratic processes, because it kind of stands in the way of our ability to be able to deliver that technology faster. I mean, if you think about us compared to other banks, we're only 20 years old. All of the other top 10 banks are over, I think, 100 years old or close to 100 years old. So we're unique in that aspect, and we were built on the concept of just test and learn and trying new things and kind of doing new things in the market. And so it's in our DNA to do things differently and to innovate. And to do things in a way that most traditional banks wouldn't even think to do. That's why I'm here. I started my career in manufacturing, and I could tell you a whole lot about bureaucracy from that job. And this was a refreshing change for me to come to Capital One. So with that being said, I'm going to thank our great panelists for sharing in today's Hangout. I think we had an awesome discussion just related to technology in general and the impact that we can make as women, and some of the things that we can do to try to push more women into technology. I know there are a few more questions that we didn't get to. If you have questions just related to roles that we have available, how to apply, how to prepare for your interview, you can check out our website. It's capitalone.com/careers, and then there's a campus link that you'll want to click. And it will have information there related to how you can apply for both internships and full-time, both of which we are still accepting resumes for. It's not too late. And then there's also information out there about the summits as well. So make sure you do that. And then also, if you just want to find out some general information about Capital One, you can check out our website as well. So thanks again for joining us today. We appreciate your interest in Capital One and our conversations that we've had today, and hopefully we'll see you on our next Hangout. Thanks.